And here we go. We have liftoff. Propulsion continues to be nominal.
RCPA chamber pressure looks good.
Following up. Roger, with planet.
Water towers fly! Yes!
Tango down to nominal.
Flight downside SPD off. Say again, SPD off. It's orange!
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage.
Look at this!
Put that in the big bag,
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
This methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You bet. We don't need any more of these.
Welcome in, everybody, to another NSF Falcon 9 launch. Good morning from Florida. That's not debris. Those are birds flying by. Good morning, everybody. What you're seeing is a Falcon 9 at Space Launch Complex 40. I'm Gene Rowley, your host today for NSF, and we are looking at a Starlink mission ready to go here in just a minute. The weather conditions look a little bit windy, but we'll check in with Dee, who's in the field this morning. Maybe that was just the close-up shot. A little bit of clouds, but everything's looking fine. We're about T-minus 53 minutes from the launch of Starlink 1214. Joining us today for this launch is Alex, co-hosting, going to be answering your questions in chat. Alex, good morning.
Hello, everyone. It's going to be another interesting Starlink launch for sure. Fortunately, unlike the one from the other day, this is not going to be landing in the Bahamas. Close to the Bahamas, but not in the Bahamas.
Yeah, that was fun to watch. That was beautiful to
Yeah.
see some of that footage from the beach and then switch over to the drone ship. This one is landing on a drone ship, a shortfall of gravitas. And as Alex said, it is not in the Bahamas. So this will be a normal Starlink. Out in the field this morning, a little chilly, I would assume, is Dee Wise. Dee, good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, it is definitely a little bit chilly. It was much worse a bit earlier this morning, and it is windy as well. So you might notice a bit of that shake. But wind isn't too bad, but it is certainly affecting our cameras here.
Well, we're looking for some great tracking shots if this one launches today. This is booster 1076 on its 21st potential launch today. In the background, working out of the control room, is the one and only Carson Phillips. Thank you for operating, pressing all the buttons, making all the fancy stuff happen on screen. And thank you guys all for joining us this morning. We were supposed to go earlier today, but SpaceX decided to push deeper into the launch window. And if you're following us on any of our socials, Facebook, Instagram, X, you would see those updates. And of course, if you're a member at NSF, you would also see those updates as well. So yeah, the truth be told, I was up at 3 a.m. this morning for a 6:19 Eastern time launch, but then went right back to sleep because, they pushed very, very late. Of course, they do a 4-hour window for this launch of booster 1076, but they push it so far into the window, we'll see what happens. We have 51 minutes to figure out what's going on. But Alex, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk a little bit about the specifics of this mission.
Yeah, so we're going to have another Group 12 mission. These missions, if you've been following along, they are essentially missions to a 43-degree inclination orbit, into a low Earth orbit with that inclination. And SpaceX has been launching a mix of V2 mini satellites and direct-to-cell satellites. Most of the Group 12 missions have been launching 8 V2 mini satellites and 13 direct-to-cell satellites. Today's mission, however, will include an extra 2 V2 mini satellites, so it'll be carrying 10 Starlink V2 mini satellites and 13 Starlink direct-to-cell satellites, meaning the entirety, the whole number of satellites carried today will be 23. So that's a bit of a change, I guess. It's not unheard of. They've already done such a mission before, Starlink 12.5. But, the bit of a departure from the normal. And so as it is a 43-degree inclination orbit, as you've probably seen in the recent months, they've been launching to the southeast for those missions. And so today's launch will head southeast. First stage will separate, will land on a drone ship, a chauffeur of Gravitas, to the northeast of the Bahamas. And then the second stage will continue into orbit. We'll do 2 burns. The first one to insert itself into a preliminary parking orbit with perigee sort of like 130 kilometers and somewhere around that. And the apogee being somewhere around like 280 kilometers. And then 50 minutes later, after it's done that burn, it'll coast to that apogee, to that highest point in its orbit, circularize that orbit, and drop off the satellites. And hopefully, if all goes well, it'll also deorbit itself over the Indian Ocean about 2 hours after launch. So there you see the sort of the re-entry corridor for that second stage to come back to Earth and be, burn up and disposed of. You might have seen in the news, though, at certain times these things do not go as planned, and sometimes, the second stage suddenly drops debris in Poland. We could probably talk about that if you want to, but that's a whole separate story.
I did want to talk about the booster that's coming back on your screen. You see it there on the right-hand side. You did mention that inclination that takes it to the Bahamas, which was Group 1012, the first landing on a drone ship in the Bahamas. I wasn't actually able to watch that. I had to watch it on NSF on YouTube, like everyone else does. So this was the first time they launched it wasn't in that trajectory, but it was first time they landed a booster in that area. Can you tell us why they did that? Why is it so exciting that 1012 landed there?
Yeah, so as usual, it's all for convenience. It makes things easier, right? So one of the things that makes things easier, you can see here a bit of a comparison between different types of missions. So whenever they wanted to launch to 53-degree inclination orbits, you can see that green, excuse me. The one up top that says Starlink Group 10-13 that was launched in October of last year, they used a northbound trajectory. The problem is during the winter months, starting in November and whatnot, the North Atlantic gets a bit rowdy. It's complicated to have good weather for the landing of the booster. And so in the winter times, they like to go southeast, which is why in November they switched back to southeast launches. But if you see there, that's Starlink Group 12-14, today's mission area. And then the one for the previous mission, the one for the Bahamas landing, 10-12. The problem is, if you want to go to a 53-degree inclination orbit, you have to go around the Bahamas, right? Just like 43-degree inclination orbits do, like today's mission. But 43 degrees, you don't really need to do a huge swing around the Bahamas to avoid the islands, right? But for 53 degrees, since it's a bit more inclined, you have to do that. And you lose performance, which means you cannot carry as many satellites on board Falcon 9. So at the end of the day, the decision is all about convenience. We want to go southeast because the weather is better there in the winter months. And if we do that, right, like imagine yourself in the mindset of SpaceX there. If we do that, we lose performance. So how do we solve this? Well, let's talk with the Bahamas government and, say, hey, can you allow our booster to land in your waters? And they reached an agreement. They took about a year or so to, go through all of the procedures and everything to make it all legal and completely signed off and everything. And finally, that 10-12 mission the other day was the first one that was able to do that. That way, they can launch southeast with better weather in the Caribbean during the winter months, and they don't need to waste performance from the Falcon 9 to do that huge swing, that dog leg, as we call it in the spaceflight industry, right? And so it's all advantages, more convenient, really great. And that's the booster coming back on the right-hand side. So it's coming back home about 3-4 days after the mission. And soon that drone ship is going to be going out again. And I'm expecting that drone ship to be supporting a very exciting mission in the next few days to the moon. So really quite a week of launches.
Excellent explanation. Thank you, Alex. D, I want to come to you for a minute. And by the way, everybody, if you want to write in chat, ask your questions at NASA Space Flight. We've got two brilliant folks here, D and Alex, that can answer all your questions. I will sort through them, and of course, I'm not going to be able to get to all of them, but at NASA Spaceflight in the chat here on YouTube, and we'll get to those questions, and I've got a couple coming up. And by the way, thank you for everybody supporting us. Thank you for the super chats and the gifted memberships and everything you do out at shop.nasaspaceflight.com. We greatly appreciate it, and it allows us to do what we do. So, D, I want to come to you. I know, I keep seeing things. I keep seeing the birds, and obviously, we talked about the wind a little bit. How is your setup affected today from the temperature, the winds? Are you in your normal spot?
Yeah, so the temperature doesn't really affect it too much here, but as far as the wind, yeah, it's making sure absolutely no lens hoods can be on our cameras. You can see for the launch today, the main concern they're looking at is the liftoff winds, which gives them a 15% probability of violation, but that's not bad at all things considered. I'm in roughly the normal spot, and so yeah, it's just trying to minimize having too much extra stuff that the wind can catch and shake your
Yeah.
cameras. But uh, and of course, with it pushing until a bit later in the window, you can see here we're a bit backlit with the sun rising over the ocean. As we get farther into the window, it will be less and less backlit, so we'll be able to get some more detail on the rocket rather than having this more silhouette type look.
So we've got some good questions coming in. Thank you, D. We're going to get to some of these. Let's see. Amrit Sukal wants to know, which Falcon 9 or Falcon Heavy mission are you most excited to see this year? Alex, I'm going to ask you that one. I kind of have my own one, but you mentioned one earlier about going to the moon potentially here in the next few weeks. Which Falcon 9 or Falcon Heavy are you looking forward to in 2025?
Ooh, there's a lot of interesting missions in the schedule for Falcon 9. Like there are a lot of science missions, also a moon mission coming up later next week, I guess, late next week. There's also for Falcon Heavy, I believe there's like a couple of military missions, and I'm not too much into the whole military stuff, to be fair, but I do like it when Falcon Heavy in general just launches and we get, usually we get those double RTLS, that return to launch site landings and everything. It's always cool to see that. And there's also a lunar lander flying on Falcon Heavy, hopefully, if all goes well, later this year. So, lots of very interesting missions. I certainly wouldn't be able to choose one. It's quite a hard decision.
Yeah, my answer, and I'll come to D for the same question. My answer is all of them. I want to see all of. I'm not excited. The payloads are the payloads. They're very cool after they get deployed into orbit or beyond. But to see a Falcon Heavy launch is just it's amazing, and it's up there with the Starship test flights, which we've been doing, which we'll talk about a little bit later. I'm getting a lot of questions about Starship. D, is there a specific mission from Falcon 9 or Falcon Heavy you're looking forward to this year?
I mean, you were just saying it. We have so many missions going on this year. Of course, we've got IM-2 coming up here very shortly. That's really exciting. There's FRAM-2. There are several crew missions. So I definitely cannot narrow it down to one. But every Falcon Heavy is special. Every crew mission is special. And every moon mission is special.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Great question. Keep the questions coming in at NASA Spaceflight in chat. Let's see. Let's talk about the space station for a little bit. Some folks are talking about space stations, and since it's a Falcon 9 launch, we can talk about the crew missions that are going up to bring back the astronauts from the ISS. And Starman wants to know, and this is an opinion question, so take it with a grain of salt. Everybody has their opinion. And we're not going to badmouth any launch providers, but Starman wants to know, what are your thoughts on the comments on the situation regarding Butch and Sunny, specifically on X? We know they're going to get them, right, Alex? And they've just been folded into their crew rotations.
Yeah, we actually have a story about this on Twist later today. If you want to watch that, that goes into more detail about all of the situation. We also had that last week. We explained the whole process of direct handover versus indirect handover, and the sort of mental process of going through all of the different capsules and everything to juggle. It's quite complicated when you have so many missions going on, right? It's not easy.
Yeah, I agree. And NASA builds in these types of situations where there's always a way for the astronauts to get home, regardless of what's going on in the news, the media. NASA's entire mission is safety. It's like the top thing. And if they even get a whiff of something that's not safe, they're gonna go to their backup plan, and they probably have a backup plan of the backup plan if I know NASA. So they fold them into a crew rotation, and I'm sure the astronauts on the space station are like, oh, darn, my 8-day mission turned into 8 months, and they love it. They're having a great time doing science. And, that's part of the planning that goes into these missions. So I don't think it's such a big deal, but looking forward to getting home. I'm sure their families were looking forward to getting them home after that long rotation. But I don't know about you, but I'd spend 6 months on the space station doing science. I would love it. Let's rotate a little bit and talk about what's going on with this rocket. We're T-minus 38 minutes into the launch, and we want to bring up the timeline for Booster 1076 on its 21st potential launch this morning. A lot of questions are coming in about the weather, but Alex, tell us what's going on at this point in the countdown for this booster and this rocket.
Yeah, so if all goes well, they should have wrapped up already the go-no-go polls before the propellant load begins. And so right now, there should probably be some call out from the launch director saying, go for propellant load or something like that. If they are indeed going for that, he will be, or she will be, going over the abort scenarios and things like that, and what to do in case of an abort. And then at T-minus 35 minutes, the automated countdown sequence begins with the start of propellant load on the first stage, both RP1, kerosene, and liquid oxygen being loaded onto the first stage. But also, the RP1 load is also underway at that time on the second stage. So that's if, big if here, that go is given. Do we know if that's the case? Unfortunately, we don't, because for these missions, there's no any countdown net or anything like that at this time. And so we have to sort of guess a little bit here. What are our ways of guessing? Well, the first one is if SpaceX posts that on X, right? Sometimes they do. They say, we're loading propellant and the weather looks good and whatever, right? So sometimes we have that luck and they post directly on X that they are going for propellant load. And other times, though, we have to just rely on defrost. So because they load liquid oxygen, it's very cold, right? On that first stage, it's going to get frosty. So about 3-4 minutes into that propellant load sequence, that's when we start seeing that frost. And then we can, completely say for sure that they are indeed into that propellant load. So we'll wait for that. We'll keep an eye on that, of course, and see what happens.
And the jostling you're seeing on the screen is due to that wind, but we went over the weather earlier, and there's about a 15% chance of wind becoming a factor. I would assume that it's not so much the winds aloft, because at that point the rocket's going fast enough to kind of counteract a lot of that stuff. It's right at liftoff, and they want to make sure that rocket goes where they intend it to. Liftoffs are optional, landings are mandatory, as they say in aviation. So we'll keep an eye on the winds at T-minus 36 minutes into the countdown for Booster 1076. Some of the questions coming in, we're going to flip over, talk about some Starship news. We don't need to recount what happened in Flight 7. Pretty much everybody here knows what happened in Flight 7. If not, it successfully, the booster went up, the booster came down, the booster was successfully caught. The ship, on the other hand, experienced an anomaly and a rapid unscheduled disassembly, and then, of course, came in spectacularly over the Turks and Caicos Islands. Unfortunately, about a week before I went on vacation there, so I didn't get to any pieces of it. But they're going to basically do the same flight profile. I assume if we see them on Starbase Live here in the next few weeks, loading, or in the next few days, really loading the satellite simulators, I'm going to call them, into the Starlink simulators into the ship. We'll see if they're following the same profile. But a lot of questions are coming in on today's chat about that. We don't have any official word right now from SpaceX, at least the last time I checked, on a launch date, but there are some FAA advisories out there, Alex, about potentially in the next couple of weeks, or again, a lot of questions are coming up about next week. We don't have anything official, right?
Well, we have as official as it can get right now, which is NOTAMs, notice to airmen and everything. And so we have those airspace closures. We have another advisory as well for ATC as well. So there's things already official in quotes, right? Do we have anything from SpaceX? No, unfortunately, no. But this is the whole process, right? We usually see these notices, we see these things, and you know what we can see as well from the air? Look at that. That's the Bahamian booster,
Great shot.
as we call it. That's B1080 after its 16 mission on that Group 10-12 mission going to the Bahamas, returning on just beat the instructions.
There's a cheeky question about this booster. Since it landed in foreign waters, does it have to go through customs? I would say no. And I'm trying to find that question. I can't remember who sent it in. I was just scrolling through some of the questions. There it is. Sailing Someday asked that question. It's in tongue in cheek, but it did land in foreign waters after all. But that's a great shot from the drone.
Yeah, and thanks to Jerry for getting out the drone out there. Yeah. Jerry Pike, you can probably find him on social media, on X and whatnot. Really great views that we're getting from him.
Look at that.
From the drone.
Not too close, Jerry. You're going to get in trouble. Look at that's a great shot. Oh, great drone work, Jerry. Look at that. Only from NSF. Isn't that amazing? And by the way, when you guys are liking and subscribing and joining us and supporting us, this is the kind of footage that we're able to do here at NSF. Jerry's he's working it. Got to save the battery, Jerry. We don't want to lose the drone. That's a great shot. Almost feels like he could fly over and land in there. Don't do it, but it feels like it. I was on a cruise ship early last year, and I just happened to get to my cabin, walked out on the deck, and there was Jerry. I said, "Don't do it." I said, "Don't fly over." He's doing it. There was a Falcon 9 booster coming back, and I just happened to catch the tail end of it as it was passing the cruise ship there at Port Canaveral on its way back to be refurbished for another launch. So, Alex and Dee, I'm going to ask you, what do you think the odds are? Because, we're getting the NOTAMs, we don't have anything from official SpaceX, but there's, from what I've been reading online, SpaceX-led investigation for Flight 7 is still open, and it has to be completed before the FAA will let them fly again. We'll give them their launch license, correct? Dee, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, so, I mean, there's a lot that remains to be seen as far as what does that investigation find? How do they remedy it for Flight 8? I assume that they've already gotten a lot of that figured out internally, because this is a SpaceX-led investigation that then, the FAA approve. And so I assume they've made a lot of that progress to be ready for Flight 8. But we have to wait and see what the FAA says if they can get Flight 8 going in the next less than a week.
And Alice, we've seen them. That's a great shot. That's a great shot. I wish there was a human for scale, because it's bigger than it looks on the screen. Alex, we've seen SpaceX turn around immediately following a launch license, just like they get the license and they go, right? So it doesn't take a long time for them.
Yeah,
They're ready.
Sometimes they even just prepare for the mission as if they were gonna get, their license on time.
Yeah.
And they do that, expecting that they're gonna get that license on time, and then by the time the license arrives, they just, fuel the thing and go. So we've seen that in the past where they got maybe the launch license within 24 hours of the launch, and that's okay. To do all of the pre-launch preparations, they don't need any approvals or anything. It's all, just operational stuff, right? That they can do on the ground. As long as they don't light the engines and lift off, they can even fuel the rocket as well. We may see some wet dress rehearsals or some full stack testing. We don't know. But as always, you can just, keep tuned into our channel to see all of those updates.
Yep. Follow us on all of our socials at NSF, at NASASpaceflight.com, et cetera, et cetera. Teresa Jones, thank you very much for becoming a Pad Rat member. And it's that kind of membership that allows Jerry to get out there with the drone on a chilly Friday morning and get the footage of this booster coming back from the Bahamas. So thank you so much for joining us here at NSF. And Bruce Bennett with a $20 super chat. 2 Falcon Heavy launches can take a lander and then astronauts to the moon for approximately $300 million. Ooh, that's going to be a tough one. Why keep SLS? I'm not going to answer that question. I don't even know if I'm going to ask it of Alex and Dee, but there has been some news about Jared becoming the head of NASA and the future of NASA. And, you see things in the news about layoffs, et cetera, et cetera. And again, this is another opinion question regarding, NASA and its future about SLS. I think they've already allocated the money. I think it's a valuable program. And I think they're going to glean some data and some science from it. Alex, I'll come to you first. What do you think before we go back and talk about this booster on the launch pad? What do you think about SLS's future?
Oh, that's probably a whole frame trench worth of comments from me. But I'm just going to say, yeah, I'm just going to be short here for once and say that, yeah, $300 million is the launch cost. You need to pay for the lander. You need to pay for the spacecraft. You need to pay for a lot of things that are not there. Yeah.
Yeah. Dee, real quick, what do you think about SLS?
Yeah, I mean, that's sure you can think of Falcon Heavy sending stuff to the moon, but what about the spacecraft? What about actually getting it there in any reasonable amount of time and the number of launches that are necessary for a Starship lander and refueling and everything? Like, there are a lot of other considerations beyond just, hey, well, Falcon 9 can launch a payload to the moon. They're very different payloads with very different requirements.
Yeah, great answer. Thank you guys for these great questions at NASA Spaceflight. I am not as scared of the tough questions as River Dave just said, because I just ask Alex and Dee. And if I get yelled at in chat, then I get yelled at. So it's just the way it is. T-minus 27 minutes into the countdown for booster 1076. And again, we're coming up on some venting, and I believe we've seen some frost on the booster. If we zoom in there.
Yeah, the wind is not helping, unfortunately.
Yeah.
In fact, the only concern today on the official weather forecast from the Space Launch Shelter 45 are liftoff winds. Everything else is, really good weather all across. There's only a 15% probability of violation, aka there's an 85% chance of favorable weather for today. So yeah, those winds at ground are a bit of a mess, but hopefully they calm down in 26 and a half minutes.
I think it might be an optical illusion with only a 15% chance of violating for winds at launch. It might look a lot worse than it really is. Now, Dee, you're out there. You tell us. You've been to a lot of Falcon 9 launches. Does it feel more or less? I mean, it's only a 15% chance. What do you say, Dee?
Falcon 9 can withstand a lot of winds. I believe it's close to 30 knots of wind that it can withstand at liftoff. And so while that may be affecting me and the cameras and my microphone, as far as the rocket itself, SpaceX does not seem to be very concerned about the winds, with them giving it that 85% go probability. Or sorry, with the 45th Weather Squadron providing the 85% go probability.
Yep. And thank you, Space Force, for doing the weather out there along the Florida coast for these rocket launches at T-minus 25 and a half minutes. And you can just barely see some frost down at the bottom of the rocket. It's tough, again, as Alex said, the winds. And I think the sunlight, because everything is in shadow on our side where our cameras are, it's tough to see. But we believe that the booster is being fueled at this point, and they should in the countdown, right, Alex?
Yeah, we can see already frost on the vehicle, so they are indeed going into propellant load.
Curveless Sphere wants to know, is this another Bahama landing? And I'll answer that one. No, as we talked about earlier, this is going to be their normal landing on a shortfall of gravitas in the Atlantic, and the recovery vehicle for these fairings is Doug, also out there. So no, this is not going to be another Bahama landing. And then also, I can't say this word, Visualize wants to know at NASA Spaceflight, are there any personnel on board when the booster lands? And I've often wondered this. I don't think so, because the little boat comes in and then folks offload. And we've had footage of that actually, where they're transferring from the little support boat to the drone ship. But it does look like on both sides of the drone ship there could be a little protective space that is explosion proof, which in my opinion would be pretty wicked to be. I would like to, if possible, I think it would be cool to sit there and feel the rumble, hear the thud of the rocket on the deck when it lands. But I don't think so. Alex, what do you think?
As far as we know, they don't have anybody on board when the booster lands. They have a support ship. We can see there now. Of course, after it lands, you can see people on the deck of the drone ship, of course. But while the landing is happening, they do not have anybody on the drone ship. There's a lot of hazardous materials and everything, even after the booster lands. It's not just the landing itself, right? There's purges and things like that, and burn-offs and whatnot. So those will be really dangerous for any crews to immediately board the drone ship. So what they have is a support ship, usually the tug that's usually, tugging the drone ship out. For this mission, I believe it was Signet Warhorse III, for just read the instructions. And I looked it up when the landing happened. It was around 7 kilometers away, and I believe that was actually the feed that we had during their stream of the thing. And yes, Carson, I'm seeing people. I just acknowledged them earlier. But yeah, the whole point of what I'm trying to say is that they just have that support ship, and it's actually like several miles away from the drone ship. They are not anywhere close.
And it gives you a great sense of scale. You saw the pilot boat come up and drop off the pilot as it comes into the port there, and those pilots know that riverway, the waterway, better than anybody, and they get paid a lot of money so they don't run into stuff. But that was actually kind of cool to see him climb the ladder from the bow of the boat and get up on the drone ship, and it gives you a good scale of a human standing next to a Falcon 9 booster. Great question, and great drone work from Jerry. Thank you very much for that. And thank you guys all for joining us this morning. Be sure to hit that thumbs up button for us. We love to see those. And it makes us feel good that you're here with us early in the morning. And you would have been here a lot earlier, but they pushed this back into the window. Dee, I'll come to you. Do you know why in the next, say, 90 seconds? Let me know why we pushed it, why SpaceX pushed it so far back. Was it avoidance or weather or what?
So we don't have any real solid information. That's not one of the things they generally will publish for a Starlink mission. However, we do know that it was only a bit earlier this morning that Falcon 9 actually went vertical. And normally it'll be at least around 4 hours from Falcon 9 going to vertical before they can launch. And I believe they went vertical around 6 o'clock this morning. I could be a bit off there. But that makes sense if they, for whatever reason, couldn't get it vertical in time, or they just decided that the weather was better at the end of the window and wanted to target that instead.
Yeah, we have no idea why, but it's weird that they only left themselves less than 5 minutes. So this is considered an instantaneous launch window for now, because they had 4 hours and now they have 4 minutes. Let's go ahead and bring up the timeline of what's going on with Booster 1076. And Alex, you can talk us through it as we anticipate the 20-minute vent here in just a few seconds.
Yeah, it's actually right there. There you can see the T-minus 20-minute vent, as always, on schedule. And so that means we are still on track for that launch at 10:19 a.m. Eastern. this vent is part of the whole process to get the rocket fuel, right? Now they have finished the RP1 load on the second stage, and they are transitioning to the liquid oxygen load on that second stage. And what they do is the line that goes up to the second stage on the stromback that needs to be chilled down, that needs to be conditioned and cooled before that process begins, before that load of the liquid oxygen begins. And so that's what we're seeing there. That's gaseous oxygen being vented, and the clouds are actually from the water in the atmosphere condensing, because that gaseous oxygen, even though it's a gas, it's still quite cold. And so that vapor just condensates and creates those clouds, as we can see there. But yep, just all on track. We're seeing just normal stuff as usual, right on the dot.
And welcome in, everybody, to the NSF broadcast today here on YouTube for Starlink 1214. That's booster 1076, attempting its 21st launch and recovery from Space Force Station in Florida. And it is on its way. It is carrying 10 Starlink V2 minis and 13 Starlink direct to cells. Is that right, Alex? I thought you said there were some extra V2 minis in there.
10 V2 mini and 13 direct to cell satellites.
13. I'm Gene Rowley for NSF. We've got Alex joining us today. Dee is in the field bringing up the camera view you're seeing now, and we are at T-minus 18, about 18 and a half minutes from liftoff. This Falcon 9 is going at a 43-degree orbit. It's going to take it northeast of the Bahamas. And hopefully this booster will land for a 21st time on a shortfall of Gravitas, the drone ship out in the Atlantic. The fairings will be recovered by Doug. And do we have information on the fairings, Alex?
Unfortunately, we do not know the flight histories or even the serial numbers of the fairings. But once they come back, after their recovery, we'll see them coming in through the Space Coast live feeds.
Okay. Yeah, sometimes we see them, sometimes we don't. If we see them, we will definitely bring you that information. There's a lot of this booster has a storied history with several launches before it. Obviously, 20 launches, and this could be one of the in the corral of boosters, one that goes beyond maybe 25, 26. We'll see what happens on this one. But we are about 17 and a half minutes from the launch of this one. And we've seen a lot of great questions come in about Starlink, about Falcon 9. For those of you that don't know, that is the 20-minute vent. And that means that they're cooling down all of the lines going to the second stage. And if you want to learn about Falcon 9, about different rockets, not just this one, but all of the launch providers, you can actually become a L2 member at nasaspaceflight.com. And you're just going to get a whole lot of information. You can also join us here on YouTube. You can join all of our other socials, NSF on X and on Facebook. I spend most of my time on Facebook. I'm learning how to be better at X. So if I make a mistake, don't ride me too hard in the comment section. I'm learning. But something new that we just did here at NSF is a weekly newsletter. So if you want to join that, you can find information. I'm sure it'll pop up in chat a couple more times about our weekly newsletter at NSF. And you can read all of the information every week of what's going on at NSF. And also, if you see a pinned comment that link you to sign up for the weekly newsletter, it's full of cool weekly NSF stuff. Be sure to hit that. It's got offers in there and other stuff that we'll talk about. But thank you all for everybody for being here for this Falcon 9, the Starlink mission 1214. And it is going here in about 16 minutes. We did talk about the weather, so if we want to bring the weather back up one more time, we have about a 15% chance of, which is low because of the winds. The winds, you can see the winds there on your screen, the liftoff winds give it about a 15% chance of violating the weather constraints. And Dee, I'm going to bring you back in on this one. You're out there in the cold, in the wind. It does look like from the camera position that it has died down a little bit.
That might be a little bit optimistic. The wind has been pretty consistent, but I was saying earlier the winds, while they may be bothersome to us, These are definitely not like the 30 knot winds that are required to really cause issues with a Falcon 9 launch. You can see they're only at a 15% probability of violation according to the 45th Weather Squadron. They're not worried about any upper level wind shear, booster recovery, or solar activity here. So, in terms of launch weather for the rocket, this is pretty good weather.
Logan, well muted. Gene.
Oh, I am muted. That's a rookie mistake. What I was saying is it does look from our perspective with the vegetation in the background, and it looks a lot harsher. But SpaceX doesn't actually publish the tolerances of the rocket. We can kind of guess based on the weather squadron and what they know, but we don't actually have that information. So, as Dee said, this rocket can handle pretty good winds. We've seen them launch in rain and wind and clouds and everything. So we all feel pretty confident about this launch here in less than 14 minutes. And Alex, I'm going to come back to you. You see the 20-minute event has stopped, which means what with regards to the timeline for this launch?
Well, that means we are already into liquid oxygen load on the second stage. I think even maybe if you squint a little bit, you might see some of that condensation already building up on the second stage. But that's too hard to see with the winds and everything. In fact, if we had the super duper telescope from D, that will probably not have helped either, because you still have the problem of the wind, right? It actually probably makes it worse because you are a lot more zoomed in into that second stage, and then with the wind moving in all back and forth, it actually feels like it's shaking even more. But yeah, it's there. We have already seen that T-minus 20-minute event go away, which is or at least a confirmation that they stopped the chill down, right? But we are hopeful always that the stop of that chill down then leads to the liquid oxygen load on the second stage. Sometimes, really rarely, if for whatever reason something happens to the vehicle or the weather, they might choose to not go ahead with that, and then we might not see any of that. But I'm seeing that small bit of condensation on the second stage, so they're definitely into that liquid oxygen load.
And Elliot, who is a first-time questioner here at NSF, thank you so much for joining us, wants to know, do we know if the extended fairing will be used on either of the two Falcon Heavy missions? Now, we're sticking to this one, Elliot, but because you're a first-timer, we're going to let this one go. I don't know if the extended fairing is going to be used or not. We'll just have to wait and see. Be sure to join us here at NSF for all of those Falcon 9s. And is it a yes or no? Alex, I'll give it to you. Do we know that? Yes or no? I do not.
I have no idea. The only missions that we have confirmed so far in the future for Falcon Heavy that will be carrying extended fairing on Falcon, that is the launch of the Halo and PPE modules for NASA's Gateway Station, which we'll see if that happens in the end, right? And funny enough, the other confirmed missions that we have seen for Falcon Heavy with the extended fairing are also launching station modules. In that case, for VAST's Haven 2 station. And if you want to know a little bit more about what VAST is doing, we recently toured their facilities. So you definitely should check that out. Dean and Das were out there, talking to Max, the CEO. So definitely should check that out. That amazing tour.
And that was very cool. Some great footage. Das in the sleeping module was actually kind of fun to watch. He was like, "It's pushing me against the thing." Just go and watch it. It's a really, really good video. Let's see. Johan M wants to know, says, not wants to know, but disagrees with me. They would not want to be on the barge that's about to be hit by a landing booster. I think it would be awesome. If it's a one-time thing, I probably would not do it. Like if it's certain death, like I definitely would not do it. But if there's a 90% chance of me surviving, I think I'd take a 10% chance to say I was on that barge, not standing there watching it, but in some type of protected environment. The compound guy wants to know how many landings does this booster have? Well, it says it right there, B1076-21, and that tells you that this is its 21st launch and potential landing. So this is B1076. It has launched and landed 20 times. And Alex, why don't you run us through the history of this booster as we just passed the 10-minute mark in the countdown?
Oh dear, you're putting me in the hot spot here because it's 20 missions. Okay, so I'll try to do it quickly. It did CRS-26, OneWeb 16, Starlink 6.1, Intelsat 40E, Starlink 6.3, Starlink 6.6, 6.14, 6.21, O3b mPOWER C, Ovzon 3, Starlink 640, Eutelsat 3060, Starlink 654, 664, Türksat 6A, which I watched live, WorldView Legion 3 and 4, Starlink 819, Starlink 668, SXM9, and most recently Starlink 12.7. It's quite funny that the next one after that it's going to be 12.14, double, 7 times 2. Anyways, just realized that right now.
Next time I'm going to ask you to do that in one breath, but you did it so fast. That's just pretty good. And at T-minus, as we pass 9 minutes, we're getting ready. Everything for this booster, 1076 on its 21st launch, looks pretty good. Oh, what was the ooh? I saw an ooh.
I was thinking we are like within a minute or so of engine chill, right? In the countdown.
I believe so. You tell me. Can we pull the timeline up real quick, Carson, and take a look at that? We should be seeing engine chill.
Yeah, because I was thinking, that's when the Merlin engines are chilled down to get ready for flight.
7 minutes.
Yeah, T-minus 7 minutes. You know what you can also do with those engines as well? We have merch on the store related to those engines.
I was just going to say that. I saw the BE4 engine and the Merlin engine. I have a Merlin engine. In fact, I'm wearing it right now. The Merlin engine hoodie. There is the shirt on shop.nsspaceflight.com. And again, I've got the hoodie version of that. But I have the Raptor shirt. So if you're a Merlin fan, if you are a Falcon 9 fan and you want to show off your nerdisms like the rest of us, check out that Merlin shirt and the Merlin hoodie because it's cold where I live, so I'm wearing the hoodie. But a lot of other great merch on there. I just got my Flight 7 patches, too, just the other day. So there's a lot of great patches and stickers and hats and all kinds of good stuff at shop.nasaspaceflight.com. Go and check that out. It's in our thrust collection, by the way. The Raptor, the BE4, the Merlin. Do they have an RS-20? That'd be, or RL-10. That'd be fun. Have some of the old shuttle launches.
I believe the 4 engines that we have so far is Raptor, B4, RS-25, and Merlin. But who knows? Maybe in the future we'll expand on that. We'll see.
Yeah, we need to do that. Okay, 7 minutes. We just talked about that. They should be doing engine chill as we approach T0. It takes 7 minutes apparently, or less than that, to chill down those engines. And the venting is what tells us. We've done a lot of these launches from Slick 40 at Cape Canaveral to kind of know. And you have a spreadsheet, don't you, Alex? Like how many launches and how many tons and this and that. And that's you keep up with all the statistics of these things. And it's amazing to see the hundreds and hundreds of Falcon 9 launches that go from Florida and the turnaround times that they have. And they've got it down to what, like a month, just less than a month on some of these boosters?
Yeah, this one is actually 24 days since its previous launch. So yeah, it's really quickly.
Dee, I'm going to come to you before we let you go for some tracking camera stuff. And anything you want to say to the folks before we launch this thing here in about 5 minutes?
Just that it's always a good day when you have a launch, and I'm looking forward to this one. Winds are pretty steady at, I believe, around 18 knots, actually.
Woo.
But
wow.
I will see you all on the other side of this thing.
Well, I can tell you from a military parachutist perspective, we would not jump into a drop zone if the winds were over 13 knots. So 18 knots for a rocket, I think, is probably okay. But I don't know what the tolerances are for this rocket. I know what the tolerances are for a T10 parachute. That's all I know. As we come down to 5 minutes, Alex, are they polling in the control room there? They're going around to say, everything is green across the board for this. What's happening right now at T minus 5 minutes?
Well, at the launch pad right now, they should be, those systems should be getting ready for strong back retract. That vertical structure next to the rocket. We cannot see it from this angle because of the crew access tower, but there's a structure next to Falcon 9 vertical to it that allows, that gives it things like air conditioning, propellant to the second stage, data, and everything, right? And that structure is going to be retracted about 1.8 degrees around this time in the timeline. There'll be two cradle arms at the top that will open and will sort of free the rocket a bit, and that'll allow that Stromback to. Oh well, there you go. That will allow the Stromback to retract just slightly away from the rocket. That 1.8 degrees at launch, that Stromback will fully retract. It's the throwback maneuver, as it's called. And so that's going to clear the way for the rocket at liftoff. In the meantime, they are also wrapping up the load of liquid oxygen on the first and second stage. All of the kerosene has already been loaded on both stages by now. And so the only thing left is that liquid oxygen oxidizer. And so the first stage will be first at T minus 3 minutes with that end of liquid oxygen load. And then at T minus 2 minutes will be the second stage. And so once that happens, Falcon 9 will be fully loaded with the propellant, and they're going to be preparing for the liftoff by draining back all of the remaining fuel and oxidizer on the lines. We'll see the return of that vent from the Stromback. We'll get, call outs like gas closeouts from the mission control, right? And that's part of that process of preparing for that liftoff. T minus 1 minute, the ground computers will hand over control of the count to the onboard computers on Falcon 9. And at T minus 3 seconds, we'll see that engines, those engines lit up. And if all goes well, before that, I forgot that at T minus 45 seconds, the launch director should give that go for launch, sort of like the final sign off for that launch. So hopefully we get to that in 3 minutes, but, fingers crossed.
And because the winds are a question today, and again, we've talked about the weather many times, but for those of you just joining us, there's the call out for the LOX load for stage 1. So we'll see some of those gas closeouts. We'll start to see the strong back venting to clear some of the lines. But as you can see on the screen, the wind is continuing to blow. So during that final go, no-go poll is when they'll make that decision. Now, it's not only the weather here, but it's also the weather in the recovery area where a shortfall of gravitas is out in the Atlantic. I haven't heard anything about the recovery, so it seems pretty good out there, but everybody's paying close attention to the winds here in Florida. And it looks like it's died down. Dia's out there with the cameras, and they know they're on the grounds. And there's the call out for stage 2, and that's what I was talking about. The clearing of those vents up the strong back is what you see on the screen right now. At T minus 1 minute, as Alex said, the vehicle will go into what's called startup, where it will do its poll, and then once that's done, it will be green across the board, and the launch director at about 45 seconds will give the final go for launch. The winds again are, I think, the question, but at this point, Alex, it looks like everybody in control room and the rocket itself is ready to go for this launch here in just about a minute.
Yeah, so far so good. She'll be going into that startup sequence in just a few seconds from now.
Yep, and then shortly after launch, we hopefully will get some good rocket noise. We should get the call out for startup and get some rocket noise coming through the microphones out there with D. Hopefully it's not just the winds. There's the call out for that. So right now they're polling through the control room, everything across the board, and hopefully here in just a minute we'll hear the launch director. And that's what we were looking for. So when we hear that, we know we are good to go here in about 30 seconds. So Stand by for Falcon 9 booster 1076 on its 21st launch to space, carrying those 10 Starlink V2 minis and 13 direct-to-cell satellites. And we'll watch this thing launch from Slick 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, and we will see you on the other side. There she goes. That is always an amazing sound when a Falcon 9 or any rocket really lifts off and we get those sounds. That is music to my ears, and I know space nerds, it's music to yours. B-1076 on its way uphill, and as you can see those Merlin engines expanding as it gets up into the upper atmosphere and the lower atmospheric pressure. We're going to hit a couple things here. Beautiful tracking shots, by the way, D. Great work. We're going to come up on a couple things that happen really quickly. We'll get main engine cutoff and then probably switch over to the SpaceX feed for the separation of the booster and the second stage. You can see those Merlins expanding out into a great plume. We should be coming up on main engine cutoff any second now. And immediately following main engine cutoff, the first and second stage will separate, and the booster will continue on its trajectory toward a shortfall of gravitas. And
There
the
is
second
MVAC ignition.
stage will ignite the MVAC, the Merlin vacuum optimized engine, which will carry the second stage. There's stage SEP.
MVAC ignition.
We'll carry the stage. It will carry the second stage up to its orbit, and here in just a second, we should see the fairings deploy, and we will follow that first stage all the way down to its landing. And you can see the grid fins extending out from booster 1076, and as it reorients itself for landing. And those little bursts you see are the reaction control thrusters. They are moving the vehicle around so that it's in the right orientation for its entry burn. Alex, why does Falcon 9 do an entry burn?
Yeah, so, well, first of all, there's the fairing separation. Nicely done. And, also, I think they've reverted the way of stacking those satellites. I'll probably have to look that up later. But anyways, so yeah, that entry burn needs to be done because right now, Falcon 9 is, well, it's still coasting, but at the time of the entry, it's going quite fast, nearly 8,000 kilometers per hour. So you need to slow that down because otherwise it's going to go through quite some really interesting effects, right? And environment. And so they need to do that entry burn for two reasons. The first one, it slows the booster down, so it kind of makes the reentry a bit nicer on the vehicle, right? But also at the same time, that engine exhaust pushes out a bit the air, the incoming air, and so that avoids it sort of, as it pushes it out, it kind of prevents that from heating up the booster a lot during that reentry. If you've seen, Super Heavy does not do an entry burn, and it glows during its reentry. Like that heating, that aft end of the booster just becomes, this red hot kind of thing.
Mhm.
And if you look at the telemetry and the data from that Super Heavy, it re-enters at about the same speed as the Falcon 9 does when it is after that entry burn. So imagine if, you can imagine what it would look like if instead you didn't do the re-entry burn on Falcon 9 and you let it go at like double the speed of even Super Heavy during re-entry, right? That will be not just red hot, but like probably melting some of the parts on the booster.
Yeah, and when it does that entry burn, it staggers it. The booster turns on the center engine first, then two of the outer engines, and you can actually see that in the plume during the entry burn, which we'll see here in just a second, where the center engine turns on, and then the shape of the plume changes. And if you watch the speed in the lower left-hand corner, which is the telemetry of the booster, you'll see it is gaining. It is now coming back down toward Earth and toward the drone ship in the Atlantic. What great shots!
Yep.
And that
Picking up
entry
some
burn
speed.
slows it way down so it can survive the friction of re-entry.
Yeah. It usually goes down to somewhere between 4,500 to 5,000 kilometers per hour. So roughly, cutting in half that speed. So yeah, it's quite a lot that it does. You'll see now that entry burn coming up shortly.
Entry burn startup.
Stage 1 AFTS has saved.
See the grid fin turning.
Mhm.
And first engine, the center engine. And there go the two other engines. 3 engines up and running. Supersonic retro
And while-
propulsion, as somebody mentioned.
Yep, supersonic retro propulsion. That's EJ's favorite saying. And as the booster's doing its entry burn, you can see on the right-hand side that the second stage is still carrying those satellites to its target orbit, which is a low Earth orbit of 271 by 282 kilometers at a 43-degree inclination, as we said earlier, before launch. And as the booster on the left-hand side of your screen gets into the thicker parts of the atmosphere, you'll start to see those grid fins. You'll start to see those grid fins really start to work, and they steer and orient the booster toward its landing spot, a shortfall of gravitas, the drone ship in the Atlantic. If you watch real close, you'll see them start to twitch right before the landing burn.
Yep. Should be coming
The
up through
landing
that
burn is only
egg of clouds. Look at that. Wow.
Stage 1.
I always
Yeah, it's
like
pretty
it
cool.
when this happens because you can see that
Yeah.
effect of like, the rate at that this thing is coming down. Quite crazy. You might see the landing burn effect. Ooh, look at that.
Oh, look at that.
Wow.
So we're getting some.
Now
Stage
take a look
1
at the
landing
speed
burn.
on the left-hand side. It'll drop first, and then you'll see the engine light up on the video feed. There it is.
Now, it's
There's a
only
bit of
the
a-
center engine on this one, right, Alex?
Yeah, only the center engine. There are times where they do
Stage 2
a 3-engine
thermal
landing burn, but not today. There we can see a chauffeur of gravitas.
Landing leg deploy.
Booster coming in hot. And bit of a bounce,
Bullseye.
but it's on the
Stage 1
deck.
landing confirmed.
It is. And I
If it's
tell
good,
you,
it's
I just
good,
want to be
right?
I want to be in a protected little room inside one of those bunkers on the drone ship. Now, what happens on the drone ship after the landing?
Yeah, so now the first stage will be saved. There's a bunch of vents that, release all of the pressure on the tanks and whatnot. There will be, flush downs of TTEV and whatnot. Meanwhile, as you can see there, the MVAC engine has shut down, getting into that preliminary orbit. We'll talk about what happens to that later, but I'll come back to the booster question first. So, all of the safety mechanisms and everything, they have Octograbber on a dedicated parking garage, so to speak, inside of the drone ship. And so what they do is they open the garage, they let the Octograbber out, and then Octograbber has these sort of, mechanical arms that attach to the hold-down clamps on Falcon 9. And it also has like some kind of umbilical kind of thing looking thing, and so it kind of helps also safing the booster as well. So it holds onto the booster, lowering that center of gravity. It prevents the booster from swinging around and sliding on the deck of the drone ship. So that allows things to be safe enough for people to board the drone ship and secure lots of other mechanisms on board the vehicle.
And on your screen, you see Space Launch Complex 40. You see the strong back retracted. They'll slowly lower that. Do they raise it up and then lower it again, or they just go straight from the retraction point down to horizontal?
They go first up. I'm not fully sure why. I think it's probably to engage back the hydraulics or like the locking mechanisms, because one of the things that happens is that it appears, at least from the hundreds of launches that they have already done, and sort of looking at how the process works, it seems like when they do the throwback maneuver at liftoff, it sort of like unlocks from the mechanisms that connect both the stromback and the launch mount at the bottom, where the booster is held down and everything. And so it's probably to relock things and make sure to save stuff and everything. I'm just speculating here, of course, based on just visual things. We have no information from SpaceX, but it kind of looks like that. And then once it is up, a few hours later, it's just brought down again, that stromback horizontal. People work on it, refurbish every system that needs to be refurbished, some inspections and whatnot. Then the stromback goes up again, vertical. It picks up that launch mount that I just talked about, that reaction fixture that they have, where they have the hold downs, the quick disconnect umbilicals for the booster and all of that. They pick it up, go horizontal again, and roll back to the hangar to install the booster and essentially the rocket again on the transporter erector. It's a whole process. We might do a video about that. I don't know. We'll see.
We have some questions about Starlink satellites and about Falcon 9, and also some questions about what we said during the uphill for booster 1076. When it was coming back to land, we both said, wow, look at that. And what we were talking about was the vapor cone. We can actually see a little bit of the vapor cone coming off of the booster as it was coming through, as it's whistling through the cloud layers and some of the different humidity layers. It will generate a vapor cone, which we don't see a lot on Falcon 9. We see a lot on Starship because it's moving real quick. And then you have the heat differential. So that's what we were talking about when we were like, wow, we were like, we don't see
actually, we actually see it on Super Heavy. You don't you recall when it's like close to the landing burn, and then there's like this big vapor shock wave, right? Falcon 9 is a little bit like, thinner and smaller and whatnot. It still creates those shock waves, but it's a bit harder to see. Boy, the Super Heavy booster does really make a show out of that, right? So whenever we see it on Falcon 9 and you see that vapor going through the grid fins and everything, it was cool to see that. I liked it.
How many launches, this is from Steve Park, how many launches of Starlinks before it goes from, quote, orbital fill to, quote, replacements? They've already replaced some. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, we believe that some of these launches are already replacing satellites. And in fact, we will probably not cover this, but the next mission out of Vandenberg, Starlink 15-1, is going to an orbital shell, which is from the old constellation. If you remember, the one that they were launching, with those V1.5 satellites and the V1.0 satellites, between 2019 and 2023, if I'm not mistaken, or 2022, I don't know. It's been a while. It already blurs in my mind. But when they were launching those, they were launching to certain orbits and certain shales and whatnot, right? The ones that they're launching right now, they are all to, or at least we think they are all to, what they call the Gen 2 constellation. But they had the Gen 1, that first set of shales and orbits and whatnot. That mission, Group 15-1, is launching to one of the shells of that old constellation. So they are replacing already these satellites from the old constellation, adding newer technology, the V2 mini satellites. Meanwhile, replays. Look at that.
There's Fleet Cam. Yep, on the right-hand side is Slick 40. On the left-hand side is Fleet Cam. That's the Bahama booster. Coming back from its initial, it's the first time launch and first time landing rather in the Bahamas, and this is called Fleet Cam, and you can see all the birds. people are going to start chatting and about what bird it is and what they eat and so on and so on. But there's the drone ship with the booster on it. Not the one that just landed, by the way. That's still way out in the Atlantic. They're still safing that booster.
Yeah, one booster in flight, one booster on the drone ship. You can see there on the replay.
And then,
a tiny
and then
little
on the
light.
right-hand side, yep, you can see it going up. That is booster 1076 on its way uphill. That's a great shot from Fleet Cam.
See, this is the kind of thing that in 2016, 2017, like, oh, that's the future. Well, the future is now. You can see a booster arriving from the previous mission, another one taking off a few miles away, heading to space, going back down on another drone ship offshore. And this is routine. Like, this is happening every 3 or 4 days.
And we will cover as many as we possibly can because the cadence is so crazy.
There will be a time that something like this. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, on the left-hand side there, you see the booster on the drone ship. Is that another booster by the crane, or is that another crane? I can never tell.
Well, the cranes just look awfully very much like the boosters. But there's indeed another booster. You can see there next to the one on the left, the gray one vertical. If you see, there's one horizontal right next to, like, near the base of that crane, and that's from like 2 launches ago. But yeah, there's a booster there. It's just not vertical. It's horizontal.
And this is from the press site. Here goes the launch from the press site. I love the replays. I really do enjoy the replays and some of the slow motion replays that we can get. And again, this is from our press site, from one of our remote cameras here at NSF.
Yep. I believe we actually have something from D for later, so stay tuned. Not
Alan
sure
Branch,
if it's...
thank you so much. I'm just going to go ahead and say some thanks here while we're watching these replays. Alan Branch, thank you so much for becoming a Red Team member. We appreciate you joining us this morning for this Starlink mission. And also, Bideford, he and I were talking, they and I were talking this morning, gifting 5 Red Team memberships. I was making a joke about Adrian having to press the button. Here's some tracking shot from, is this pizza or is this D?
It looks one of the Cape Camps might have been pizza.
This is Need Pizza, yeah. Great work. And just so you know, if anybody's wondering, there are crews of people all around the world that operate these remote cameras for these launches. And we, again, I can't do it without them. Alex, you and I can't do it without these folks logging in at the right times in the field, like D and Max, doing this great work behind the scenes. That is a very, very cool track. Well done.
People are wondering. So it's because that's their name in our server. Yeah. And it's okay. He does a great job. Look at that. Great
behind
tracking.
the scenes, there are a lot of people that make all this happen. Alex and I are just the voices, sometimes the faces and the voices, but there's an entire team of people doing so much good work that bring all this to you. And that's why the support is so important. That's why shop.nasa Spaceflight is so important. That's why joining us on nasaspaceflight.com and L2 is so important, because it really, really makes all this happen. Alex and I have the easy job. We get to watch this stuff and talk about it. They're out there doing it like D live.
Auto track is this one.
That's really
This is a robot.
So
nobody
good.
behind this operation other than, well, I guess there was actually somebody that had to tell Auto track, hey, do this. But other than that, Auto track just tracks this until it thinks, oops, I'm losing it.
That's a great track. And the wind is bouncing around.
This is weird. So Carson just said in the back channel, next one is special. Ooh.
Yep. Don't go anywhere.
Huh. That's interesting.
I mean, the auto track camera is doing a great job. And until it's not.
This is auto track, so
Yeah,
sometimes it's not fully reliable. Unfortunately, there's no entire replacement for a human operator yet.
Still fun to see rocket launches. I'll take all of them. Every rocket launch. Wow. I mean, it just stayed with it, didn't it?
Yeah.
When I was flying UAVs, we could go into like IR, black hot, white hot, and that'd be an easy way to track a rocket. But during the day, it's just tracking it's not tracking the IR version of this. I assume it's just tracking the whatever it locks onto, right?
I really
it's
don't know
stuck
how it
with
works, if I'm gonna be honest. I know
Yeah.
that there's a program, right? And that there's training, and boy, yeah, that was a whole long thing back then with the training and everything to get this program right. And so yeah, that's all I know. I do know that sometimes when it really works well, it can track the second
Yeah.
stage almost to SECO, to like second engine cutoff. So like it tracks the stage separation, it continues with the second stage, and even though it's a really small pale dot nearing the horizon, right, it still tracks. When it works well, it really does work well.
Yep. Look at that. It got separation, and it's just like the computer is like, is that one look more rocket than the other one? All right, here we go. Special. Oh, this is from the drone shot. This is from Jerry. Nice.
Look at that.
Jerry's in a hover.
It's another perspective. You can see a lot of the, like all the way to the left. I think that's the VEV, right? All the way to the right. The end of the Cape Canaveral. That was cool. I think a bit of more of a.
I mean, you guys got to
shot.
remember it's like freezing cold out there, and the wind is blowing, which makes it even colder. So, thank you guys for being out there.
You can see how quickly it kicks up speed.
Doss always talks about that when we're in South Texas for the Starship launches. He's like, the big struggle is not finding the rocket. The big struggle is trying to determine when it starts off slow and then it goes up real fast, and then when the booster comes back,
Yeah,
like trying to stay with it at the right trajectory and velocity and all that stuff. So these tracking shots are actually really cool. Great work. That's a neat shot.
really clear skies.
Yeah, I was going to say, once it got above the cloud layer, it just, man, right to the top of the frame. Yeah, very good work. Very good work. Alex, I need you to do some deep, detailed information on how the auto track works. So when it comes back, all right, there's some blue sky. What are we looking at? Back to Slick 40, where booster 1076, now -22, has landed on a drone ship. It just took off from that space launch complex, carrying some direct-to-cell stuff, satellites, some V2 minis. And all of the questions that I have right now are about Flight 8. We do not have an official word on Flight 8, but stick with all of our socials at NASA Spaceflight on Facebook and on Instagram and on X, and just follow us, follow Alex, follow me, follow all of us here at NSF. When we get information, we will give it to you. But it's really following those, the NSF social. What were you gonna say, Alex?
You can just not follow me. It's okay.
follow Alex. No, seriously. So when you do that, right, you can, or join NSF, you can actually go behind the scenes with Alex when he's writing a lot of the scripts and all the other work that he's doing. You can actually have fun with that. And thank you, Dee, for being out in the freezing cold this morning. Are you back with us?
Yeah, I don't know how the connection is, so I might be a little robot-y. but it was a good launch, all said and done. I was glad to see it go, and we had some nice, clear skies.
Thank you so much for those tracking shots out there in the freezing cold, in the winds. And of course, the guys behind the scenes, Carson leading us from the control room this morning for a great launch for Starlink Group 12-14 of Booster 1076 on its 21st mission up and down. Thank you to everybody for all the support today, all the great questions. I've been Gene Rowley. I am Gene Rowley. I will continue to be Gene Rowley for NSF. Remember, guys, dream big, keep your eyes on the stars. We'll catch you in the next one.
And here we go.
We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Traveling up. Roger, roger, planet.
Water towers fly! Yes! Tango down to nominal.
Fighting outside ST off. Bring in ST off. Off. It's orange! Orange 45! Oh my god! Oh my god! Decollage! What is it? Put that in the big bag, Eagle.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
This methane will be igniting with the flare, correct?